Welcome to Lab 200 of the Container Native Development with OKE. In the first part of this lab, as the DevOps engineer persona, you will provision a Kubernetes cluster and all the infrastructure required using the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Console. In OCI, you will provision a virtual cloud network, compute instance, load balancers, and Kubernetes Master and Worker instances. You will also install and configure the OCI CLI, and finally, install and configure kubecontrol. Let's start by provisioning a Kubernetes cluster using the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Console. Let's navigate to cloud.oracle.com, click Sign In, enter the cloud account name, click My Services. Enter the required username and password, and click Sign In. Once you are signed in, let's navigate to the OCI console. Click Services, Compute. Now we're going to click the menu at the top, select Identity and Compartments. You will see our demo compartment is already created. Now let's navigate to Identity Users. Click Create User. We're going to create a user called Cluster Admin. Enter the desired name and description. And click Create. Now that the user is created, we're going to create a password. Click on the user, click Create Password, and then let's copy that password to be used at a later time in the workshop. Now let's navigate to Identity Groups, and let's add the Cluster Admin to the Administrators group. Click on Administrators, click Add User to Group, select the Cluster Admin user, and click Add. Now we're going to navigate to the policies, and we're going to add a policy for Kubernetes. So let's click Identity Policies. Let's select the root compartment for your tenancy. Click Add Policy Statement, and enter the following text. And click Add Statement. Now we're going to create a VCN for our Kubernetes cluster. Let's navigate to Network, Virtual Cloud Networks. Let's be sure we select the demo compartment and click Create Virtual Cloud Network. Click Create Virtual Cloud Network plus related resources, and click Create Virtual Cloud Network. Let's close this window. Now we're going to add some roles. Let's click on the virtual cloud network that was just created. Scroll down to the subnets. Click on Security Lists. And let's add or edit the following ingress and egress roles. Now we're almost ready to create our OCI instance, but first we need to generate a public-private key pair. So on your local machine, let's make a directory called Container-Workshop. Let's create a subdirectory within that directory called SSH Keys. Once we are in that SSH Keys directory, let's issue the following keyden statement, which will generate a public-private key pair. Now you'll see that there's a private and public key sitting in the key directory. Let's switch back over to the OCI console. Let's navigate to Menu, Compute, and Instances. Please make note that we're still in the demo compartment. Click Create Instance. We'll accept the default name. Let's select the operating system. We'll select the shape of VM Standard 1.1. We're now going to browse out to our public key we just generated and select that. Under networking, verify that the VCN and public subnet are selected. And let's click Create Instance. This will take a few minutes to create. While this is provisioning, let's jump over and provision our Kubernetes cluster in the OCI console. To do this, you'll want to sign out as your original user, and we're going to sign back in using the clustered admin user that we created earlier. Be sure to use the password that you generated earlier and copied. If this is the first time logging in as cluster admin, you'll need to set a new password. Enter in the new password twice and click Save New Password. Once signed in as cluster admin, we're going to navigate using the menu, Developer Services, Container Clusters, OKE. Again, we're going to do all of our creation in the demo compartment, so let's select that and click the Create Cluster. Here we're going to enter in the following information: the name, the Kubernetes version, we're going to select our VCN that we created earlier, we're going to select the desired subnets of AD1 and AD2, and we're going to add a node pool. We're going to enter the name node pool 1. We're going to select the version 1.10.3. Our image version is going to be Oracle Linux 7.4. Our shape will be a VM standard 2.1. And we're going to select the public subnet of AD3. And lastly, we're going to enter a quantity of 2. Scroll down and click the Create button. Now you'll see the Kubernetes cluster is in a status of creating. Now we're going to jump over and we're going to access our instance that we created earlier using OCI console. First, we're going to get the public IP address of the instance, 129.213.115.36. We're going to use that IP address to connect using the SSH key. Let's issue the following SSH command using the key and the user OPC. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to download and install the OCI CLI, issuing the following command. And we're going to accept the defaults here. Let's click Yes to modify the path. Let's leave this blank to accept the defaults. Now the OCI CLI has been installed. We now need to configure it. To configure that, we'll need information relevant to our cluster admin user. So let's navigate back to the OCI console, and we're going to select the user cluster admin, and we're going to copy the user's OCID. We're also going to copy the OCID for the tenant itself, which is also the root compartment. We're going to take this information and we're going to issue the following OCI setup config command. We'll accept the default location. Now let's copy the user OCID. Let's enter the tenancy OCID. In our case, the region is US Ashburn 1. Enter a yes to generate a new RSA key pair. And let's accept the defaults for the remaining questions. Now that we've set up our OCI CLI and generated a new key pair, we're going to take that key now, and we're going to copy it. And we're going to switch back over to the OCI console. And for the user cluster admin, we're going to add that public key to the user. So let's paste the key in and click Add. Now we're ready to download the CubeConfig file using the OCI CLI we just installed. So let's navigate over to our Kubernetes cluster. Let's click on the cluster. And let's click on the Access CubeConfig. Here it's going to give you two commands that we're going to issue from our terminal window. Let's copy those and switch back over and issue the first command. Let's make the directory for Cube. And let's issue this second command, which is going to download and store the config file onto the virtual machine. Now that our config file was downloaded to our OCI instance, we're now going to take and make a copy of that. So let's cat the file, and then we're going to copy the complete contents of that file and paste it into a local text file on our local machine. Now that we have our config file, we can now move on to installing kubecontrol on our local machine. So on our local machine, let's issue the following command within our container workshop directory. This will install or download and install kubecontrol. Now that it's been downloaded, you will see that it's a kubecontrol.exe file. Now we're going to define the environment variable kubeconfig, which will point to the kubeconfig file we just downloaded earlier. So let's issue the following export command. Now that that's been set, we can interact with our Kubernetes cluster using kubecontrol. Let's issue the kubecontrol cluster info command. Let's also issue the kubecontrol get nodes command. Now you'll see that there's 2 nodes running and ready on version 1.10.3. Now we're going to issue the kubecontrol proxy command. This will allow us to interact with the Kubernetes dashboard within a browser. Now that the proxy is up and running on 127.0.0.1 port 8001, let's switch over to our browser and open the Kubernetes dashboard. We also have to choose our kubeconfig file, which we downloaded earlier. Let's do that. Now you can see we can interact with the Kubernetes dashboard. We can see services, pods, etc. Now we're going to exit out of the Kubernetes proxy. Welcome to Lab 200 of the Container Native Development with OKE. In the second part of this lab, as the lead developer persona, you will be responsible for configuring the parts of the automated build and deploy process that involve details about the application itself. To containerize and automate the building and deploying of this application, you will make use of Wercker pipelines for CI/CD, OCI registry for a container registry, and OCI Container Engine for Kubernetes for provisioning a Kubernetes cluster on the Oracle Cloud infrastructure. Now that Kubernetes is installed into the OCI environment and kubecontrol is installed and tested on the local machine, let's configure and run Wercker deployment pipelines. First, let's define a Kubernetes deployment specification by going into the Twitter feed OKE repository. Let's click Create New File and enter in the name Kubernetes YAML.template. Let's also copy and paste the following statements. Remember to commit the new file. Now we're going to edit the worker.yaml file to include the Kubernetes kube control commands. Let's click on worker.yaml. Let's click the edit. And let's paste the following kube control lines into the file. Let's remember to click commit changes. Now we're going to switch over to Worker. We're going to go to the Twitter feed OKE application. We're going to click on the Workflows tab, and we're going to add a new pipeline. Let's enter deploy to cluster for the name. And click the Create button. Now let's add to the workflow by pushing the plus sign. Let's select the pipeline Deploy to Cluster and click the Add button. We now need to add some environments to our worker workflow. The first one is the token, and we're going to gather the token from issuing the following cat command, which is going to grab it from the kubeconfig file. Let's copy the token. Let's go over the worker, click environment. Let's enter the name Kubernetes auth token. Let's paste the token into the value. Check the protected and click the add button. We're also going to switch over to kube control, and we're going to gather the Kubernetes Master URL, or the server URL, by issuing the kube control config view command. Let's copy that. Let's switch over to worker. Let's add the Kubernetes master variable. Let's paste the server URL and click add. Our next variable is going to be the OCI auth token, and to get that, we're going to generate it from the OCI console. Let's go to the cluster admin user settings, click auth tokens. Let's click generate token. You can enter in the description here. Click generate token. Let's copy that token. Let's switch back over to worker. Let's create the OCI auth token variable. Be sure to click the Protected button and click Add. Now that we've set up connectivity between Worker and Kubernetes, let's go back to our last failed run. We'll see that the push release failed. Let's highlight that. And let's rerun it by clicking the Retry button. After some time, you'll see that the deploy to cluster was successful. Let's validate the deployment. Let's go into OCI. Let's click on Developer Services, and then Registry OCIR. Here you will see the Twitter feed image, and you will see that it was deployed correctly. Now we're going to issue the Kubernetes proxy command. Let's jump over to Kubernetes kubecontrol web URL, the Kubernetes dashboard. Let's click on pods. Select the Twitter feed pod. And here you will see that it's running. We can also issue the following curl command, which will retrieve a couple Twitter feeds. Now we're going to switch over and we're going to actually deploy the product catalog application using kubecontrol dashboard, Kubernetes dashboard. But first we need to copy the Kubernetes YAML file to our local directory. Let's take the Alpha Office product catalog kubernetes.yaml file and save it to our local machine. Let's switch back over to the Kubernetes dashboard. Click on Overview. Let's click the Create button. Let's create from file. Let's select the Alpha Office product catalog Kubernetes YAML file that we just downloaded. Let's click Upload. After a few minutes, you'll see that the product catalog application will be deployed. We can click on the services, and we'll see the external endpoint for the product catalog application. Let's open that in a browser. And here we can see that the application is running. Let's click on one of the products. But we notice that there are some tweets that are not aligning properly with the product that we clicked it on.